Bill Cooper is here in Grand Junction with SavATree. He's been an arborist for many years and is on the Grand Junction Tree Board. Thanks, Bill, for being a presenter today.
Sure thing, and you may have to give me a tutorial on how to do this.
Okay, so at the bottom, there's at least on mine, it shows green and it says share screen.
Oh yeah, okay.
And then when you click on that, it will give you the options of what screen on your computer you want to share.
Perfect. Okay. Cool. All right. I'm gonna put myself over to the side here so I can see what's going on. Can everybody see?
Yep, we're seeing your presentation, but not the presenter view, just the PowerPoint app.
You can see the PowerPoint, but you can't see me. Is that what you're saying?
No, you're good. You're in presentation view, so go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So I presented this talk last year or 2 years ago at the Western Colorado conference. So for those of you that were present there, I apologize. There may be some, we'll be going over the same topics, but to everybody that hasn't seen this yet, I hope you've gained some insight. A lot of it, I'm sure, is review for you. I kind of structured this for a happy medium between professionals and homeowners, but yeah, we're just going to go over kind of the fundamentals of tree care in these challenging high desert climates that many of us find ourselves in out here in the West. So we'll probably breeze through it pretty quick because I think I designed this for more of a 45-minute presentation than 20. So I apologize, but let's get going. So basically it boils down to 3 issues. You got your, species that aren't appropriate for the area, challenging soils that react kind of poorly to common residential landscape care practices, and then poor site planning issues. Our species, none of these species that we have in these, and for the context of this presentation, I'm talking mostly about valley regions under 6,000 feet in Western Colorado, Eastern Utah area. So none of these urban forestry species are native to this area. So they all have their, challenges dealing with our unique conditions. And then many of the management decisions we make on how we care for our landscapes makes it even tougher on them. Our soils are tough. They're clay compacted. There's no organic matter, high pH, usually over and under irrigated, oftentimes in the same scenario. And then, we just don't think about things in the beginning to set our sights up for success in the long term. A lot of the landscapes around here are just seems like they're just kind of thrown in the ground and, on a hope and a prayer that they'll make it past the warranty period and nobody has to replace any trees. And then from there on, it's like, not my problem kind of outlook. So a lot of the messaging here will be kind of proactive. What we do today on the front end is so important for long-term success of our urban forests. So let's get started on soils. Soils are very important, as we all know, and how we treat our soils based on the water we put down is also very important, especially in these clay-based soils. So these 2 images on the left are a heavily irrigated site in Grand Junction, where you can see the trees are quite unhappy. This place, every time I drive by there, the water's on, basically. And then the other 2 images are sites where the landscape's basically been neglected. There's the 2 in the middle are bur oaks. These are bur oak trees here that are basically, I don't know how they get their water. I think there's a little bit of a drip system, but not enough to support these trees. And then here's a linden over here in a lawn that's just been completely ignored for who knows how long and doing quite well. So oftentimes, we fall into this trap in the West, in the arid West, that like more water, more water, more water, where you live in a desert is 105. But in reality, that water is creating soil health issues, and trees are often better off with a little less. So I'm sure most of you know this slide pretty well. Soil type and soil texture matters. Clay soils are tightly compacted with not a lot of pore space, so there's already reduced oxygen availability to the roots and the soil microbes. And then you go and compact it with excess irrigation and lawn maintenance equipment, and that little bit of pore space basically gets filled up with water or becomes even smaller, and there's even less oxygen available, which hampers root function and soil health. Best thing to do if you want to get a handle on what's going on below ground is to buy a soil probe. This is a great US made company. They make really high quality tools. You can find cheap stuff on Amazon if that's more your flavor. But yeah, we'll keep on cruising. Kind of just went over this, but less pore space, too much water equals compaction and no oxygen, and then you get a dead tree. Also, probably a slide that's familiar to many of you, the nutrient availability to plants based on soil pH. So basically this square on the left highlights the zone where most plants are most happy, because that's where most nutrients are readily available, which is in this sub 7.0 range, so slightly acidic soils. And then this is our reality on the west slope of Colorado in these valleys. We're typically between 7.5 to 9 almost. And you can see when you get up into that range that even nitrogen and phosphorus are not as available, but especially, your iron, boron, copper, and zinc. Like, this is why chlorotic trees are such an issue over here, because the nutrients just are tied up in the soils and unavailable to the trees. So planting the right tree is so important. I love this picture. I think it's a beautiful picture of the country, but it basically is showing the soil pH across the country, and you can see, these valleys. So like the San Luis Valley, the North Fork Valley of the Gunnison, Montrose Valley, the Grand Valley, and then working your way up the Colorado River Valley, up valley somewhat. Our soil pH is typically around 8.0. So not great for growing trees that like to grow in these more acidic soil conditions out east, ash, maple, the like. So that kind of leads me into the species part. This is probably, as horticulturalists and landscape people, we know our plants, but oftentimes it's tough to square the ideal plant selection with the customer's desires and, the landscape demands and whatnot, or restrictions for better. Yeah. So bad trees, we got your maples, of course, your red and silver maples, horrible choice for high alkaline soils. Many of the conifers, spruce and firs especially, are not great. And then aspen, doesn't always show chlorotic signs, but more often than not, it's not doing real good. So if you want to take a screenshot or picture of this, I'm sure many of these species are familiar to most of you, but here are some better choices. We've been seeing a lot of good luck with oak varieties in the valley, surprisingly. Our bur oaks are doing really well. Chinkapin, Shumard are doing pretty good. Hackberry does kind of get a little chlorotic, but it's just a bomb-proof tree. And if you can deal with the nipple galls, then you're in good shape. Fruitless mulberry, awesome choice. And I don't need to go through all of these, but y'all get the picture. There are quite a few good conifer species as well that do pretty well here. I've seen, on the surprising side of things, we've got some giant sequoias growing in the Grand Valley that are just seem to be thriving. I mean, they're not, massive old growth trees by any stretch, but they're getting there one year, a little bit at a time. So that's pretty exciting. And so there's some unique opportunities to plant cool trees If y'all want to dive in a little bit deeper, I'm on the forestry board with the city of Grand Junction, and we worked to produce a updated what we're calling the all-star tree list. You can visit it at this website down here. Sorry, again, I know it's not convenient, but big long list of trees that we like and are recommending people plant in the Grand Valley. Moving on. So here's some examples of just what happens when you don't take all this into account, so this is all on the same site in Grand Junction. A little bit tough to see the way I did this, but you basically have the base of the trees down here at the bottom, and then like the canopy up here at the top. As you can see, they're all basically dead. And in my assessment, I believe this is probably due to probably herbicide, in my opinion. One of the big fallacies of not just the Grand Valley, but of Western landscapes is that we have a tendency to rock and fabric everything in the pursuit of low maintenance landscapes. But in reality, what ends up happening is we just invite a scenario for aggressive weed growth, and then we end up spraying all this land with herbicide to kill the weeds, and then we forget that the trees are the biggest weeds on the property. So these are all young trees, been in the ground like maybe a year. They are being irrigated, although probably not well enough. But from what I can see, I mean, you can see like the resprouts here, just like the leaves are kind of curled up and weird. All of this around the base of this tree is dead. This is like some ground cover landscape plant. It's all toast. So yeah, management decisions after planting and, throughout the life of the landscape have a tremendous effect on the trees. Again, the conversion of turf to rock is another big theme throughout the West, not just on the Western Slope, but I know like municipalities on the Front Range are pushing to, have cash for grass programs and de-lawning everything. I get the desire to save water, especially municipal water. However, when we forget about the trees, this is the result. These trees have been growing reliant upon the lawn for 20, 30 years, and then you quit irrigating them, and what do you think is going to happen? So yeah, I see this every single day. It's really, really heartbreaking. And then just poor planting. There's a lot of people that just slap these trees in the ground, and like I said at the beginning, like they make it through that year or two warranty period, don't die, and they're home free. But I see this time and time again. People aren't unstaking the nursery stakes from trees when they go in the ground. People often think this is like an acceptable way to stake a tree. This is actually designed for, as most of you know, as for the nursery, for stability in the nursery, not stability in the landscape once planted. So if you need to stake a tree, it needs to be staked properly, and not tied with a tight, strap like this. Planting deep, as we all know, leads to issues. Both of these photos kind of highlight what happens when you plant deep. This was the soil line here on this dead tree. As you can see, this is an adventitious root that grew in response to being planted deeply. I'm guessing this is probably where it was planted in the pot that it came from in the nursery, and then was just slapped in the ground. But as many of you know, the actual root flare and is down quite a bit lower. These trees, this is an example of a row of honey locusts and palisade that were planted. I was called out because the trees are all like just oozing sap, and they're like, they've got borers, we're going to get a refund from the nursery. I was like, no, they don't have borers. You didn't plant them right. They're too deep, and now you're drowning them, and they're just trying to survive. Every single one of these trees is like that, and they weren't staked. So in my opinion, I think that the installer decided that if we bury the trees deep, it'll make them more drought tolerant because their roots are deeper, and also it'll make them more stable so we can save money and not have to stake them out for wind protection. That's just an assumption, though. I didn't talk to him about that. Here's that same site where we see excessive water use, brand new honey locust trees that are some of the most hardy trees around, almost dead because lo and behold, they're being watered basically every day like this. Here's a hackberry, again, one of the most robust trees around, and it's hanging on for dear life. And because the reason being is the soils here are just completely saturated. Like I put my soil probe in the ground here and it just came out like you wouldn't even believe. It was like well, clay. It was like you're making bricks. And then some dead Austrian pine, dead spruce, same scenario, too much water. Grass looks great though. Tree wins. Here's some successes. So again, like, yeah, unique species, giant sequoia, just thriving. Tree's about 40 feet tall. Awesome tree. Blue spruce. This is one that I mentioned at the beginning as a tree that doesn't do well here. Well, you know, in the right scenario, it can, because these guys are on a system where they're not being irrigated, you know, every day or every other day like many of these landscapes are. I see that if you can't see it in this picture, but these people irrigate with a hose and a, you know, frog eye sprinkler that they're dragging around the landscape. So probably once a week, if that, they're watering these trees deeply, and that's exactly how they need it to be so healthy. And then this is on the same property as this tree, but I think this is a Nuka cypress. Don't quote me on that, but you know, a tree that really shouldn't be doing that well here, and here we are. It's beautiful. It's probably my favorite tree in the valley. So proper cultural care, especially irrigation, goes so far in caring for these trees and these tough sites. Excuse me. Again, some more examples. Here's a white ash in a de-lawned area when it's thriving. Reason being, you can't see it, but there's like a ring of emitters all around this tree that are irrigating this whole area. So when they did this, they accounted for the water needs of the tree. Same thing here. I'm sorry, got to tickle my throat. Bur oak also doing great. And honey locust over here. Again, like the difference here, you can see dead weeds all over up here, but it's not, the place is not devoid of weeds, meaning or implying that they didn't put down a soil-based pre-emergent in the springtime to like kill all the seeds and hamper the root development of the trees. Instead, it looks like they probably used Roundup or some other broadleaf selective after emergence, which in my opinion is a much better selection when you're working around desirable plants, because there's not like that soil activity that lingers and can cause major damage. Yeah, more like these honey locusts have been completely ignored for however many years, and they're just, you know, dark green and full canopies and doing quite well. Here's those two pictures from the beginning, linden and bur oaks. Just, I wouldn't say thriving, but a lot healthier than those trees that we saw at the other site where they're being over irrigated. And then here, these honey locust trees are at that same site where those trees I've been showing are getting too much water, a different part of the property. But as you can see, they're in these concrete graves along the sidewalk, and they're not doing great. You know, there is dieback. They're not, you know, super thin, or they're not super thick canopies, but I would expect them to be doing quite a bit worse given their site. And I think part of the reason that they're doing better than the other trees on the property is that they're kind of in a situation where they can't be abused to the extent that the other trees are, just because of them being surrounded by concrete. So in this case, it's kind of like they're saving grace, but I feel like one day it will come to pass. So that's it. Like I said, kind of flew through that one. I guess if we have any time for questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, we do have time for questions if anyone wants to unmute.
Hey, Bill, I've got a couple questions. Would you think that that your tree list or recommended trees would also work on the eastern plains?
Yeah.
Colorado?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I'm not as familiar with sites on the Eastern Plains. I would imagine, you get a little bit more rain than we do, also a little bit more severe weather. Soil type, I'm not sure what the difference is there, but many of those species that we have on the list are not particularly um, unique to the Western slope. Um, in fact, many of them are native to areas in the Midwest and east side of the country. So yeah, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't do well.
Okay, kind of figured. Another question, you mentioned about a 40-foot giant sequoia.
Hmm.
I was
Not
waiting for
quite,
that.
not quite sure, but that might be large enough to make the champ tree list.
Yeah, I feel like I may have been overestimating but it's close. It's close. We should measure it, Kamie.
Okay. What about that other one? Do you have that one on the list, Neil? The one that Bill was guessing at?
Not sure. I'd have to check it.
The Nuka cypress, where to go?
Oh,
Yeah.
let me see.
I don't, again, we need to verify that is what it is before we go. And but yeah,
I don't
it's a
think I
beautiful tree.
I don't think I do. The ones I think that I have are at Denver Botanic Gardens and one in a couple of them in South Denver. Let me see what that looks like here.
Tom may know more about that tree. He's familiar with this property more than I am. But you're muted. Still muted. All right. Anybody else got any questions? Oh, there he is.
There I am. Bill,
Yeah.
who is it?
Up on Bookcliff Court.
Oh yeah. Where the sequoia is?
Yeah.
Yeah. That guy actually planted that tree.
Yeah.
The homeowner planted that tree. So anyway, it's a specimen, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So up and back at the hospital.
Right.
Yeah, cool.
Do you know if this tree is a Nuka cypress or not?
I do not know.
Okay.
Nope.
All right. Anybody else got anything for me?
I did share the list, Bill, with in the chat for the link to it. We
Perfect.
have a new one that needs to get updated to the website that actually, if you're in Junction, there's example places that you can go see those trees. We have addresses, but they haven't updated the website yet, so that's coming.
Cool. Yeah.
Go ahead, Carrie.
Oh, sorry. Couple things. One, I think Adam had a question about a picture from the chat, whether there was top pruning. And then two, I don't think I saw bald cypress on your list. Do you guys have any bald cypress there? Is any they're very alkaline tolerant. Maybe I just didn't see it.
Yeah, it's here.
It is. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's a few in the valley. I would say the Don Redwood's a more common choice of the two, but yeah, they're around. They're just not super common. Yeah, I'd like to see planted more.
We would love to maybe find a few of those out in you guys' area for the purpose of the climate resilient trees project that we're doing. We're doing some testing on cold and hot hardiness at the CSU spur, and having some tissue samples from those bald cypress would be awesome.
Cool.
So yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
John Martin is doing the research on that, and he has not been asked yet, but I will be asking him to present for our July conference meeting. So heads up, John.
Yeah, happy to do it. We're including bald cypress in the cold hardiness testing currently. So we have a couple of genotypes in that group.
Yeah, I think eastern and western parts, like Neil was mentioning, are really similar, and also really are the example landscape for Colorado. People think we're all mountains, but we're not, of course. So like, if we had some older examples of ones that were doing really well there, because you guys get the worst of the worst in terms of the hot and the cold,
Yeah.
like that would be really good for us to include, I think, John. We can talk offline, Bill, but thank you for presenting. Nice job.
Thank you.
Yeah, good job, Bill. We have
Thanks, Tom.
some great specimens of the cypress trees. So yeah, Bill, you and I get together and pinpoint those. And but yeah, we have wonderful bald cypress growing in the valley.
John, maybe we should do a co-tree view layer of the trees where you're getting samples. And so then it's easier for you to track them for future education use of where you collected samples.
Sure.
And Allison just asked if Chinese pistache would be successful. We have quite a few Chinese pistache over here in the Grand Valley. Do you guys have those on the Front Range? Those of you who are on the Front Range?
Yeah, there's a few around. I know there's a few in Fort Collins. They tend not to be as cold hardy here. So, but in Oklahoma, where I'm from, they were super cold hardy. So I think it's just a matter of seed sourcing.
And Andy asked about cryptomeria. I'm not familiar with that. Valerie says there's some on the plains of the pistache.
I've not seen any cryptomeria here on the western slope, so, and I am familiar with that tree. So
The conifer, the cypress family.
yeah.
I think Denver University had one cryptomeria, and it was up, maybe 15 feet tall or so. And I don't know what the reason was, but it finally kicked bucket.
Interesting looking leaves on it. Needles. All right. Well, thank you so much, Bill. Appreciate you stepping up and presenting this for the folks. I always need a refresher on soil. So
Yeah, I apologize. It was so quick, but yeah, if anybody wants a copy of the presentation or wants to chat, let me know.
yeah, I usually put them up on our Google Drive. So I'll grab that from you when you're after
Sounds
the meeting.
good. Sounds good.
So yeah, thanks again, Bill. So now we're switch over to our second presentation, which is Chris Beiser. And Chris gave his introduction. Again, he's with the city of Basalt and is a glutton for punishment, always willing to step forward when I ask for presenters. So thank you to Chris. Go ahead.
Yeah,
I think you should be good to go.
And before I start, I can hear my coworker screaming in my ear. She would correct you. It's the town of Basalt because we're not big
I'm
enough
so
to be
sorry.
a city yet.
Thank
I
you.
used to call it the city, and I got very loudly corrected early on.
Got it.
All right, so I am Chris. I am the arborist horticulturist with the town of Basalt here in the Roaring Fork Valley. I think this presentation is going to complement Bill's pretty well. By no coordination whatsoever, he talked about 6,000 below, and I talk about 6,000 and above. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. All right. And hopefully I am in presentation mode with everybody. Is it showing the right screen for
It's
that?
showing the presenter view, not there it is. Got it.
Sorry, I've got a couple monitors going on
Yep.
here, so you never really know what it's showing. So yeah, like I said, I'm going to be presenting kind of my informal cultivar and species trials that I've been doing in Basalt. We sit at about 6,000, 6,500 feet here. It's been a common conversation topic with myself and my fellow arborists up and down the valley in Aspen, Carbondale, Glenwood Springs. We tend to meet up a couple times a year, and this is one of the most common things we discuss is the fact that we need to really be expanding our palette of what we can recommend and what we as a town and cities can actually plant in our urban settings. So for those of you who are not familiar, the Roaring Fork Valley, we sit kind of we're one of the last big valleys before we get to the western slope. We have a pretty wide range of elevations. Glenwood Springs sits at about 5,700 feet. Basalt and Carbondale are right in the middle at about 6,500 feet. And then Aspen sits closer to 8,000 feet. And if Dave Kuhn was on today, I'm sure he would be kind of like, he's the one that really has the true challenges of trying to find some species diversity, because it really does start to drop off that list as you get that higher elevation. We talk a lot about the fact that Glenwood Springs can often get away with a lot more species and cultivars. Just that 1,000-foot change up to Basalt probably cuts my list in half of what I found we can successfully grow here. And then that list gets cut probably again in half by the time you get to Aspen. What's kind of challenging about growing here in these valley communities is that we all kind of experience these microclimates, right? We have our own little unique mini situations. So what a lot of times what happens is, you look on paper what should work, and it's may or may not be true for your area. I originate from Chicago, which I think is funny because it's actually in the similar hardiness zone as here in Basalt. We sit at a 5B to 6A that seems to have increased ever so slightly with the new hardiness map releases in the last year. But really, that's not necessarily true that anything that is hardy down to that zone is going to work here, because we also have pretty low humidity winters, very dry conditions despite locally heavy snows at times. So I find we get a lot of winter moisture mortality in trees. So stuff that will grow just fine during the growing season, but will croak come that first rough winter. We also have in Basalt hot, dry summers with what we call unpredictable monsoon season weather. We can sometimes go months without measurable rain, followed by 3 weeks of rain every single day. It's a little bit unpredictable with climate change. I feel like it's getting even more unpredictable. What we used to consider as like a pretty regular rainfall during the monsoon season, as we call it, has now shifted a month in either direction, depending on really what our larger climate patterns are doing. Additionally, we have some unique soils here in Basalt. The entire town exists on a old riverbed. So I always laugh when I see your clay soils. We are like sitting on gravel and cobble, essentially. I brought my fancy soil probe with me from Chicago. I can't get it more than an inch into the ground in most places because I'll run into about a softball-sized rock pretty much immediately. We dig holes with rock bars more often than shovels in this town. That provides a pretty interesting challenge in the sense that our soils really don't hold a lot of nutritional value for trees, for plant material. So we do rely pretty heavily on the native options that we have. So as I go through this, I would say about half of all the new trees we put in, we tend to favor that native or very close to native selections. But then I've really been trying to expand our palette, like I said, and look at what new, weird, quirky trees we can get to grow here. We do also living on this at the base of, or at the confluence of two rivers. We're living both on the Roaring Fork River, which is the larger river in the valley, as well as we're sitting where the Frying Pan River comes into the Roaring Fork. We get localized flooding almost every single spring. The picture on the right is actually our flagship river park that we built in the last 2 years. And this was last year. We had some pretty aggressive flooding. We had to get wattles out to try to keep the entire area from being inundated with 2 feet of water for 3 weeks. We also, because we are a growing town, we have a lot of money that coming in with new residents. We have a lot of residents coming from Aspen that can simply no longer afford Aspen, but are still well above the average wealth for a household. We have some very heavily landscaped, heavily managed areas. And that's reflected in our park system and our trail system, where we have a lot of these parks that are really high profile, heavy management, lots of irrigation. But then they'll be right next to a native unirrigated area. So we have that juxtaposition, a lot of these wide range of conditions for growing. We also have kind of two halves of town, and I didn't actually include this in the PowerPoint, but I think it's worth showing. So this is my tree plotter here. Our town is split in half, essentially. The southern section, the south east section of our town is what we call Old Town or East Basalt. And that is really where we have historically most of our town has been located. About 20 years ago, that the town actually annexed this upper northwest corner here, a little bit further up the valley. It's called Willits, otherwise known as West Basalt. It is all part of the same town, but it is kind of where our urban center has come to be. It's all 3- and 4-story buildings, concrete islands, very heavily hardscaped and landscaped areas. So we do deal with quite a range of different kind of locations here with some of these old school designs ranging back almost a century to Willits being, less than 20 years old. With that and with this increased development, we do have a lot of increased urban plantings. In fact, we kind of have wrapped up that Willits development, and we've moved back to the old half of town, and we, in the last 2 years, actually raised our downtown area there and have replaced all of the infrastructure from business front to business front on Main Street. That includes all the landscaping, all of the hardscaping, sidewalks, etc. So we do have an increased use of these urban plantings, and as a result, a lot more heat island effect on some of these plantings we have. So when I started in 2020, we had about 2,500 trees in our inventory. About 23% of those were maples. I'd say about 75% of those, the maples within that Acer genus were either Autumn Blaze Freeman maple or Emerald Queen Norway maples. Those were the 2 favorites for a long time. They grow quite well here. We don't deal with quite as much chlorosis issues with our maples as some of the surrounding communities, although we have generally given up on most of our earlier red maple cultivars. We don't really plant silver maples as a result either, because those I found do have some chlorosis issues. We've been an accredited arboretum since 2013. So we do have a pretty good history of proactively introducing unique tree specimens, both as a way to showcase for homeowners the unique stuff that we can grow here, as well as providing that public service of being that accredited arboretum. In the past, actually, my predecessor, Lisa, who's on the call right now as well, she really encouraged that diversity. But when she left the organization, maybe about a decade ago at this point, a little bit longer than that, there was this gap where nobody really kind of took the reins. And that diversity and reintroductions have really had slowed down since I had started. A lot of that included the second half of Willits being built out, a lot of the neighborhoods that have been built out. And as a result, it was essentially up to the developers to decide what to plant, which we all know how that goes. I have a lot of ash trees now and a lot of Emerald Queen Norway maples, and then that Autumn Blaze maple, because designers love the fall color of that Freeman maple without really caring about the fact that you're dooming me to endless maintenance on those trees. We do have some challenges with establishing trees in urban settings. We've actually, on top of that Freeman maple population, I've had a lot of issues with honey locust and linden mortality. I think it's a range of issues. A lot of what it goes back to that no developer oversight, poor planting practices that are then just kind of rearing their head years later. I think Bill really hit the nail on the head there, when it's all about getting through that 1 to 2 year warranty period. That's all the developer really cares about, and then they're off that site, and they don't really care about the long-term health and success of those trees. So we do have a lot of trees that looked fine for a couple of years, but they were obviously planted too deep. Nobody was checking the irrigation on them, so we have a lot of mortality issues now that are kind of coming to head with that. Along with that, we have had several town projects that have given me a lot of opportunities to encourage new species. The town of Basalt is pretty heavily involved in the development of these business core areas, these residential neighborhoods. So we actually control all of our right-of-way trees. Just about every landscape tree in the Willits area, as well as any of the downtown areas, we are owned and maintained by the town. So I have the right and ability to replace those with things that I'd like to see newly tried. We've also been redoing some of our larger parks. So that Basalt River Park I had a picture of earlier, that's our largest new park in town. We've added maybe 4 other parks in the 5 years that I've been here. We have several new neighborhoods that have come online, the newest one being Stotts Mill. So they're just now finishing the build out of that and starting to fill in the homes. And then as well, we have some additional development opportunities, and I've been using those as spaces to trial some of these new trees. So before I get into, what species I've been trying, I do have quite a few resources I've reached out to over the years. Colorado Tree Coalition and the Trees Across Colorado program has been a really great help. That's where I've been able to get a lot of trees that they've been trying on the Front Range as well as the Western Slope to be able to try here. A little bit of a downside with those is they're very small, so a lot of times they just don't have that cold hardiness and are unable to handle some of the immediately cold winters that we have here. So you'll see a lot of the pictures I have. I mean, I did throw this PowerPoint together in 48 hours, but a lot of the pictures I have are when these trees first went into the ground, and you can kind of see how small of trees we generally are working with. We also work with I work with our local nurseries, Eagle Crest Nursery, which is actually who Lisa is working with now. She and I sit down every fall, go through their entire plant ordering lists that they can order from with their distributors. And we kind of select a half dozen to a dozen new species and cultivars that both I'd like to try, as well as then Eagle Crest can actually look at and see if it's worth offering to residents in the future. I also have a great local native plant resource, the Colorado Edible Forest with Vanessa. She does a lot of our heritage fruit tree plantings. We got to be a little careful on where those sorts of things go because we do have that concern with bears in the mountains. But we do have one of the only edible food and seed gardens in the state. So I do have a little bit of flexibility to be able to introduce some interesting fruit species. I engage a lot with the landscape architects through our design process with these new developments. I pretty much require at this point that these developers are following the 30-20-10 diversity rule. I strongly discourage any additional introductions of that autumn blaze Freeman maple. I've been trying to push back on honey locust just because we've had a lot of mortality issues with that. Obviously we no longer can use ash as an option. And we found actually emerald ash borer in our valley about 2 years ago, down in Carbondale. So that's even more important now to not be introducing additional ash trees. I meet a lot with our local municipal and industry arborists, both our reps with SavATree I've worked with to get some of these new species, as well as a couple other smaller companies in the area that can source some of this stuff. And then also just checking with those nearby municipal arborists on what they're trying, what they're seeing. I think Dave and I work a lot on, what I'm trying, he can attempt to use up in Aspen. And then I do actually have a background working at the Chicago Botanic Gardens, so I rely on a lot of resources from there. Again, because on paper we have a similar growing hardiness region, I tend to be willing to try a lot of things that I know work in Chicago that a lot of people kind of scoff at me for trying here. For instance, I planted 2 magnolias here, which I think people laughed at me when I asked if I could order a magnolia for the valley. And, we'll talk about that at the very end. But one of the things I really emphasize is don't be afraid to try new species, new cultivars, just because somebody in the industry says it'll never work. It hasn't worked here in 30 years. That doesn't mean that it never will work. We have this climate change has really changed the game a little bit for what does work and doesn't work. And because of our interesting little microclimates, I think there are unique opportunities throughout our town, especially in some of our less exposed areas, to try some of those marginal species. So this is not every species and cultivar I've planted and trialed since 2020. Some of these are actually repeats that may have been trialed 15, 20 years ago, but for whatever reason failed. I just kind of pulled the big ones off of there. I did not break this down into individual cultivars. I did a little exercise on my tree inventory, and since 2020, we've put in 415 trees. So in 4 years, it's about 100 trees a year. Of that, I have 135 unique cultivars or species in that spread. So I've really been pushing to try just about anything I can get my hands on. I think it's a good, it's very informal. This is not necessarily some fancy scientific process that I'm going to write a paper about. It's really me getting multiples of each type of species in the ground in different settings and finding out what works and then sharing that knowledge with our regional partners. You'll see some color coding as I go through some of the big ones I really wanted to highlight here. The green ones we're going to just quick run through, but then anything in black there as well is doing quite well. I'm pretty excited actually to see Osage Orange and see how that performs here. One of the big requests, again, because the residents here have gotten so used to the autumn blaze fall color, is they really want to see the fall color show. So one of the ones I have on here is that rubber tree. I actually haven't planted more of those despite them doing quite well because they're pretty boring in the fall. And I've actually gotten complaints from residents about the fact that they just turn brown and drop their leaves. And how could I possibly choose such an ugly tree for, outside their house? But I really like to just try everything that I can. Some interesting ones on here that I won't cover that I think are worth I'm keeping an eye on. My favorite tree is on here, larch trees. I've tried the American, European, and Siberian larches. Siberian larch seems to do quite well here. I've got about half a dozen of them growing around. And as well, I do have a couple of American larches that have made it through at least 3 winters so far. European, for whatever reason, I actually have only got my hands on one of those, and that one died actually before it even made it to the winter because we had some irrigation issues. The ones that are in orange and red, orange I have in our inventory. They are still alive as of this past fall, but we're definitely struggling, and I probably will be giving up on those. The ginkgo being a shocking one, I kind of assumed that would do really well here because the thing is practically bulletproof. But it's got some weird interactions, I think, with the elevation here. I have 2 young ones that have made it through 3 winters so far, but they have stunted leaves every year. They just don't really seem to perform the way they're supposed to. I did allow with our Midland Avenue, our main street redo. They've got a couple of larger specimen ginkgos that went in there, so I'll be very interested to see how those do. And that'll probably be the last that I'll try of ginkgos if they don't make it. And then the ones in reds are species that I've tried that I've kind of moved past. Bald cypress, I've never managed to get past a single season. I've tried both American and European beech. I have one that actually has still survived after 3 years, but they generally have not performed right. Turkish filbert is one that was tried a few, maybe 15 years ago, and I reintroduced it again. They survived maybe a year or 2, but just never really performed well. Northern Catalpa is another one I was kind of surprised. I was hoping that would be a good one. Despite it not really being able to handle heavy snow loads, it should be able to be cold hardy, but I've never had one make it through the winter. And then as well, I've tried a couple different cultivars of tulip tree that haven't made it. So we're going to run through the ones that I have highlighted in green here, just because those are the ones that I see as being very promising for the next couple of years. Kentucky coffee tree. This one shouldn't really be a surprise to most people, but there wasn't a single one of these planted in the town when I first moved here 5 years ago. So that was kind of a shock. I've planted at least 20 of them now around town in various settings. The one in the picture is a new one that went in last summer in a pretty heavily irrigated garden space. So that'll be an interesting trial for there. It's where we actually had some honey locusts that didn't make it. They seem to be tolerating extended drought periods quite well. I have some planted in right-of-way areas that get no irrigation. And after that first year of hand watering, they seem to be tolerating just the irrigation they get from the climate around here with no supplemental water, which has been great. They have occasionally dropped their leaves going through that really strong drought period. We had a really long drought 2 summers ago that a couple of them went about a month and a half without any supplemental water, and they dropped their leaves but then proceeded to leaf out again, which I was pretty happy to see. We have them planted in Park Street and those urban tree the tree graves as people call them, in various places, and they seem to be performing quite well in all those settings. I also really like it for the fact that they have a late leaf out and early leaf drop, which is really great for snow and ice loads. Anybody that's experienced a late winter storm here or an early winter storm in the winter season knows that you can have a really beautiful tree trashed overnight. When I talk about the hybrid elms, that tends to be their biggest issue, is they just fall apart when they get heavy snow loads. I've been focusing mostly on that decaf and then the espresso cultivars, and I haven't really noticed a significant difference in performance between the two. London plane tree, this was another one I was pretty excited to introduce. I've planted now about 10 of them around town. 6 of them came to me as a bare root tree from the Trees Across Colorado program. I've been planting a couple every year, both the Bloodgood and the Exclamation cultivars. I've generally been more pleased with the Exclamation cultivar, but both have survived now 3 seasons. This one in the picture, this was actually a picture I took last summer. This is its 3rd summer in the ground, and it really took off, probably put about 3 feet of growth on this year in some spots, which is really great to see. But you can see how small of trees I'm generally working with when we first plant them. I'm not bringing in these large 2 to 3 inch DBH trees, which sometimes means that they have a little bit more susceptibility to that winter mortality than others. The one bummer with these, they do leaf out late, which is nice for those late snows that we get. But they also have a very late leaf drop, which, you know, in some cases we had a really early frost here this year, and all the leaves got stuck to the tree. And I'm looking at one outside my window. It still has leaves on it that are brown. And we've had a few winter storms that have bent those trees essentially in a 180 U shape where the top is now touching the ground. Surprisingly, they've been able to handle that quite well. You just go over there and shake the snow off, and I've seen 0 branches break from them so far. So that's been a pretty good indicator that they can handle at least that snow load when they do get it. We did bring in a couple larger specimens as well for the Midland Streetscape. They got planted in late fall. I'll be curious to see how those do, because again, it's that developer planting these trees instead of, you know, me being out there and being able to get the planting depth right and be a bit more critical about it. I find that these bigger developments, we run into those cultural issues that end up causing mortality before the actual species starts to play into its limitations. Oak options really have been pushing the oaks hard. I think we have a lot of new oak species and cultivars that are now coming on the market that have been really successful here. Shumard oak is one that we've been trying quite a bit. That's the one you see in the picture there. This was actually a cultivar of Shumard oak, the Prominence cultivar, which I'll be curious to see how that performs. It did great last year. I have several smaller ones around town that have come back at least 2 years now. Texas red oak is one that I'm trialing that we'll see how that does through the winter here, but I have high hopes for that. As well as then I had Eagle Crest bring in some heritage oaks, which are cross oak species, which will be a good one to trial. I've also been planting quite a few of the cobblestone oak, which is a type of bur oak. I've had some troubles establishing those, but the few that I've managed to get through that first year are performing quite well once they've gotten through that transplant period. Another really great one that's done really well in our urban settings is the chinkapin oak. I have some larger specimens that are near the hotel in Willits here as a right-of-way tree that are probably pushing 5-6 inch DBH at this point. They've been in the ground for over a decade and they are performing excellently. It's one of the oaks I favor for developers to plant because they seem to tolerate some more abuse than some of the other oaks do. I've generally been avoiding columnar oaks. Those cultivars tend to be a favorite of designers because they fit in tight spaces. They are great for little right-of-way spots where you're worried about clearance issues. And this will be a recurring theme, that upright, the columnar cultivars are terrible for snow loading. And then combined with the fact that oaks tend to hold their leaves pretty late, if not hold them the entire winter. I have some street spire oaks that are doing quite well that just turn into this splayed mess anytime it snows. And I have to kind of reconcile with how I'm going to deal with that. It's going to take some creative pruning, I think, to really bring down the height of those and try to get some thicker stems that can handle the weight a little bit better. Another kind of surprising one that's done really well here is the golden rain tree. This is one that we couldn't actually grow in Chicago because despite it being marginally hardy, it just could not handle those really aggressive winters that we would get there. I've planted now 3 of them in town. I think they do quite well in the urban areas where we do get a little bit of that heat island effect, so it doesn't get quite as cold. But this is one in front of one of our shops in Willits that's been there now for 3 years. I had SavATree actually bring these in. They were a little bit larger specimens that were planted. And this tree has been doing fabulous. I've been really excited to see that this thing comes back every year. It does tend to leaf out pretty early, but it tolerates spring frost pretty well and recovers pretty well if it does get hit hard. We had a really rough couple of early spring freezes this past growing season that knocked out pretty much all of our ash trees in town. This one also got hit pretty hard and it leafed out afterward just fine. The only downside to these is because it does have that reiki, because it's a bipinnate leaf, the compound leaf setup. It does tend to be a little bit messier as far as a street tree is concerned. I tend to tell people to suck it up because all trees drop leaves and, you know, it's going to be messy now or in a month or 3 months and you can't get away from it. But it does have a really nice yellow flower to it and some cool looking seed pods, a little bit more from my botanic background, a little bit more interesting aesthetic value to it. Hackberry, this one was brought up in Bill's presentation, so I won't spend too long on it, but I've been finding this is extremely versatile tree. The one in the top photo, of course, I have the top of it cut off because this was actually a picture of showing where irrigation was spraying it on the trunk. But that's a nice size hackberry. We have a couple of those in the park there that probably are hitting their 25, 30 feet height. They're sitting at 6 or 7 inch DBH. They've been doing really well. They were an option years ago and they fell out of favor for a while because people thought they were dead in the spring because they were really late to leaf out here. I've had to actually chase some people with chainsaws off their property because I'm like, give it 2 more weeks because I know it's not dead, you know, and you just need to give it a chance. And it does really well once it does leaf out. I've been trialing them in some other more challenging areas. The bottom photo is one of our bus stops in town. It's one of the few areas where I have to use those rock beds to be able to fight the constant foot traffic that goes through there. So that garden bed, I actually have large cutouts in the weed barrier fabric so that they have at least a 6-foot radius around where the tree was planted, where they have full soil exposure. So I'm excited to see how those do there. I have them as right-of-way trees that seem to be doing quite well. And I've been pushing this as another one for developers to use more because it can tolerate a lot of really poor initial planting conditions and still perform well. The Russian hawthorn and generally hawthorns is one that, my predecessor, Lisa, planted quite a few hawthorns and they do quite well here. They tend to stay small, so they're not really suitable for a street tree use, but they do well as a small ornamental tree. We've been using them more commonly now as screening trees. The frontage roads screened from the highway there because we have a lot of that residential highway interaction that people are constantly looking for better screening options. The Russian hawthorn I found tolerates drought exceedingly well. I have them planted actually in areas that have 0 irrigation. This photo here is the best I could find of some of them growing. It's in one of our small little pocket parks that does not have any supplemental irrigation, and there's 3 of them kind of lining that back fence area that are doing quite well. It's another one that tends to leaf out a little bit late, so people think they're dead, but then you just got to give them some more time and they do quite well. I've tried some other hawthorn species. We're working on introducing a few more of the Toba hawthorns. I've got a handful of Paul's scarlet hawthorn, which again, they have that nice flower in the spring that people really love. The Paul's scarlet hawthorn I have noticed has some leaf blight issues when we do have a wet spring that have really set a couple of them back. So I probably will slow down on planting those. But the other hawthorns in general, I've had pretty solid success on. The elms, the hybrid elms, Chinese elms, lace bark, we've tried quite a few of them. This is one I've been actively trialing all the different cultivars because they tend to have that more vase upright shape. They have issues with snow loads. I have a lot of limb breakages that happen. And I've actually been finding that that's less because of the cultivar issue itself and more because nobody has been maintaining them since they've been going in. So we've been finding that This is a common situation with our elms here, is that on the left is an elm that's been in the ground for probably 5 years and no one's ever once touched it for pruning. And as a result, it has a lot of included branch unions and a lot of weak V-shaped unions that just cannot handle that snow load. So I've been having to do some more heavy pruning of these to try to correct some old structural issues. They tend to have that same pitfall as the autumn blaze Freeman maple, where they require quite a bit of maintenance to set up their structure. But I did want to quick go back to this. They do tend to have some pest issues. I find they get a lot of aphid and scale if they're left unchecked. They do have a later leaf drop. So again, that snow load, they tend to be able to hold a lot more snow, and especially ice when we get ice storms here. But I've also found that despite seeing half the tree ripped off by an ice storm, the thing keeps trucking. I mean, they can tolerate quite a bit of damage, and they tend to heal over that damage quite well. And in fact, this photo that on this slide is a tree that had about half the tree trunk ripped out, young in its life, and it's completely healed over and is growing just fine now. This is an interesting one because I've not really landed on which cultivars of these new hybrids I like. There's a lot of them out there. With our New River Park, I had them plant about 5 different cultivars and 3 replicates. So that'll be interesting to kind of see how they perform right next to each other. And I can start to get better recommendations of which ones I like for structure. At the moment, my favorites are really that Choice City, the Frontier Elm, and then the Discovery Elm, which all happen to be the Ulmus davidiana hybrids. The ones I've struggled with really are the Prospector, tends to have really aggressive branching structure, as well as then the Triumphs have had mixed success in some of our plantings. And then other honorable mentions, so I do need to wrap up here. We are trying more maple cultivars. You know, at the end of the day, everybody loves maples. We can't get away from them. So I would love to be able to see, you know, just at least getting away from that autumn blaze cultivar. Through the STEP program, the Select Tree Evaluation Program, I got a couple Manzano big tooth maples about 2-3 years ago, and they are doing excellently. I will probably be reaching out to get some additional ones of those in the near future. They're a great medium size tree that are great for parks. They have an awesome fall color. They are native, which is really great. So I've been really excited to see that those are doing well. I've also been pushing people towards some of the more improved Freeman maple cultivars. We do have good success with the Sienna Glen. It tends to be a lot less of a messy structure, especially that's great for residents that just don't have the time or skills set to be pruning things proactively every year. They tend to have a little bit more of an orangey fall color instead of red like the autumn blaze, but in general, people are pretty happy with those as well. We're also trying I believe the Celebration Freeman maple is another one that we're trying in a couple places. I've been using the Mayday tree, the bird cherry tree, Prunus patus has been doing quite well here. Very similar to the native choke cherry, but just tends to be a little bit easier structure to manage for parks. I'm sure everybody here in municipalities can relate to the fact that despite wanting to get to every tree to prune them every year, the reality is you get like once every 5 years to touch some of these trees. So picking trees that naturally have good structure really goes a long way to ease those maintenance concerns. Osage orange is another one that has pretty extreme drought tolerance. I've seen them go again without any supplemental water in our area for an entire season and do just fine. And then we do have quite a few solid native conifer options, but one that I am trying is the Southwest white pine, which seems to be doing quite well. Some final notes, you know, I always, again, get pushback from people when I'm asking about new species and cultivars, ones that may not be new necessarily, but would be new for the area. A lot of times they may or may not look like they'll work on paper, but it's worth trying because you do really get unique microclimates in a lot of these mountain communities. And don't let anybody tell you what will or won't work. I always think it's worth trying something because until you know in your specific area if something works or not, you really just will not know. And be ready to fail. That's the important one, right? Is I plant a lot of these trees knowing full well that I'm pushing the envelope on what really is appropriate or will work. And a lot of times that ends up that I just end up replacing it the following year. But sometimes I hit something that's great. You know, I would have never tried a golden rain tree in our area had it not been for just taking that risk. Similarly, in this picture, I have that's a Korean fir that I'm growing there, which is another one. I'm a sucker for small conifers. I used to work in a conifer garden at Chicago Botanic Gardens, so I've been slowly introducing these cute little ornamental conifers around willets, and all of them seem to be doing quite well because one, they get, you know, that regular irrigation, and they do get to benefit a little bit from that heat island effect of being in a more hardscaped area. And also really, if you are thinking about trialing some new species, make sure you're doing multiples of them because I find that a lot of these individual tree deaths that I deal with end up being more cultural issues than actual species limitations. And then I also like to make sure that I'm introducing them in multiple locations, right? Because even within the town I work in, we get a lot of like microclimates, depending on whether we're talking about the urban areas, some of our irrigated gardens and parks areas versus our native areas and our right-of-way areas, which all can really present unique challenges for what trees grow there. And then just a reiteration that poor management practices really are a lot of times the reason why these trees fail. Some of the biggest pitfalls I've run into is these developers that will come in that don't really expect to get any oversight from the town arborist who's overstretched and can barely take care of the parks all by himself. And so what happens is I see and approve a plan that has a really great diversity list on it. It's got a lot of unique, cool trees. And then 2 years later, when the landscape actually gets installed, I walk by and it's nothing but Norway maples because, oh, well, we couldn't find those. We just subbed out, you know, what we could get. And the developer will always take the path of least resistance and cheapest resistance. So you really need to make sure you're checking in on these new development sites, even in places that are heavy oversight by a town, things like parks. I've had the contractors try to scoot in really bad cultivar and species swap outs when it originally had it spec'd for something pretty cool and unique. Again, too, that warranty period that I know a lot of people deal with, we have a standard 2-year warranty on any developments the town is involved with. Making sure that those warranties are actually being honored, the maintenance is being kept up on. Those first couple of years in transplanting is really critical to the success of a lot of these marginal trees. And then specific for me, but probably shared amongst a lot of you, animal grazing and specifically deer and elk buck rub wipes out some of my tree stands in a matter of 12 hours. This is a new limber pine I had planted. It looked great all summer. It put on a foot of growth the first year, and in one night it was destroyed by a deer coming through and wiped out this and actually 6 more in a row right here. So make sure you're really proactively installing deterrents because, you know, this sort of damage on a young tree can really, I mean, it's critical that doesn't happen because you've trashed that tree for life. And I tend to, again, be the sucker that leaves that thing up thinking it's going to recover and it just slowly dies over the next couple of years. If you're interested in the full list of everything we do, because I certainly didn't cover everything that that I've trialed, we do have the Town of Basalt tree inventory on this software called Tree Plotter, which I'm sure none of you are familiar with. And it's available to the public. You can look it up on there and it'll give you a full list of all of our species and cultivars. And I do pretty proactively remove ones that aren't working because I do use this as a resource for residents looking for the unique species they can plant, as well as guiding people through our accredited arboretum. So that is it for the presentation. I am happy to answer questions. And I see Carrie, Chris, what code are you using to enforce your tree replacements and developments? Zoning or forestry code, and do you have code enforcement ability in the code? That's a great question. We have a lot of really we have a pretty solid tree ordinance in this town. And I've been working pretty aggressively to try to bulk it up on the front end, meaning the people that are putting in permits for development building applications, getting ahead of that building application and forcing them to give me both a tree inventory on the property and their predicted or expected removals, I found has been way easier than getting handed a finalized architecture design that has a 100-year-old fir tree where the new house is going. And I turn around and say, well, no, you know, our tree ordinance says this is a heritage tree, you can't remove it. And they say, well, no, you know, you guys already let approved the design and we're not going to spend $100,000 redesigning this house. I've run into some sticky situations like that in the past couple of years. And so I've really been pushing for enforcement up front so that people are very well aware of it, so that it's not a surprise when I come in late stage and ask if they've been following all the rules. We do, like I said, we have a tree ordinance that essentially leaves up all tree removals up to me and my discretion of whether the town's going to approve it or not. We generally follow a 1-to-1 tree removal for replacement for removal protocol, although again, it's a very case-by-case basis. Being a small town, I get a little bit more granular oversight of those individual permits. I know that's probably not the case for bigger cities like Grand Junction or some of the Front Range cities. And that's something that we benefit from, is that, again, being that small, I get a lot of oversight. It comes my way because I wear a lot of hats for what I do.
Yeah, understandable. Thanks for that answer, Chris. But just to follow up to we had trouble in Fort Collins actually tracking the replacements. So, for example, all the great pictures you had of trees that weren't cared for and died after the development went in. So the warranty period is done, but they have a responsibility to the zoning code to actually replace those trees. So then they replace them. Right, we didn't have much leverage at that point, except the zoning code to say you're in a violation of the zoning code kind of a situation. So then our code officers would be the ones to actually do that regulation. But then they would again allow them to die. And so then we were back to square one again after a couple years. And then you'd have trees that survived, trees that were removed, trees that were replaced, trees that weren't replaced, trees that were replaced and died. Like you had like 7 different categories of trees to track at that point. So it got really, really complicated. But yeah, I just wondered to see if you had any secret weapon to deal with that.
Yeah, it's again, we're smaller community. I've got maybe 3 total neighborhoods in our town that are like larger neighborhood developments. So I do have the benefit of I can drive all the neighborhoods in a couple of hours and I can see what's being removed, what's dead. Almost every one of our neighborhoods has some sort of an agreement where the town owns the trees. The homeowner is responsible for maintenance and replacement if the tree dies. And then we require that the HOA actually enforces those replacements. And as part of the replacement, that they would be required to get a tree permit, which is what alerts me that a tree is being replaced. It's obviously not perfect. I frequently chase people around with chainsaws. Well, I don't chase them with a chainsaw, but I chase them with the chainsaw in their hand to get off the property. I tend to try to work with these companies because I know that a lot of times people are just not aware of it. And at the end of the day, I do actually have a lot of my tree care reps for our valley live in the neighborhoods that I take care of. So they're pretty good about, again, that like resident feedback to let me know when things are happening, getting some extra eyes out in the field.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that's kind of how we land on that. It certainly could be better. I hate being the enforcement officer at the end of the day. I would love to have a code enforcement officer in our town, and I've actually asked for that many times. But at the moment, again, being our small and community, it's me and 5 other people taking care of all of public works. So
Understood. Thanks so much for the presentation, Chris. That was great.
absolutely. I see Carl here asked, have you had or anyone had any issues with golden rain tree reseeding aggressively? I've heard it's an issue in other states like Texas and Florida. I have not. In fact, although truthfully, I'm probably the town is probably the only entity in this town that actually has any golden rain trees planted anywhere. And all 3 of them are in Willets, which are surrounded by concrete sidewalks and parking lots. So I haven't had any issues with reseeding of them. I'll have to keep an eye on that though, because obviously I am always worried about accidentally introducing a new invasive species. But so far that has not been any issue or concern for us here.
I'll say that I have seen it recede, not in a park or a turf situation, but in hardscape more than anything.
Really?
Reseed aggressively. But in parks and where there's turf, I haven't seen it at all. The other thing is that golden rain tree gets an insect that loves the seeds, and it's not damaging the tree. It's just a nuisance pest that's going to hop in, crawl in the windows and in every place it can. So they're, that could be an issue with golden rain, but great tree. So
Yeah. And actually we deal with that with box elder. It's one of our few, I don't even know if you call it native, but naturalized trees here.
Sure.
And that is a common complaint with those. Why everybody wants to remove them is the box elder bug that comes with them. Yeah, but it's an interesting one. And truly, I was half expecting when we planted the first one that it'd be dead in a year, because I've never seen one grow in this level, this cold hardiness, but they're doing quite well in those heat island areas.
Good.
We've had the same experience, at least I've seen here in Denver. Sometimes in shrub beds and so forth, the seeds will germinate pretty readily, but same thing in a park or right of way, not near so much.
Yeah, and actually that reminds me of the Kentucky coffee tree has a tendency to really like to sucker a lot. It's got a pretty aggressive root system, and I know I haven't really dealt too much with the decaf and espresso cultivars. They may have improved on that problem quite a bit. But with the straight species that we had a lot of in Chicago, a lot of people actually didn't like them being their street trees, because eventually they just get millions of little suckers coming up in their adjacent yard and in the turf right away. And I know that was a problem at the Botanic Garden as well, in native areas where they weren't regularly cutting the grass. You would find that you could go and actually harvest entire Kentucky coffee trees out of there after every year, because they put on dozens of suckers around the root zone. All right.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. That was a really, really great presentation. When you get a chance, shoot me over your PowerPoint and I'll get it loaded up.
Will do.
Google Docs. I'm going to do a quick presentation, just a few things I wanted to share with everyone, and then we'll go over to the move into the round table. So I should put my picture on here only because I put my coworkers' pictures on the next slide, and I thought I would be even because I'm a firstborn Aries and everything must be even. So again, my name is Kamie, Western Colorado Urban Community Forestry Specialist. The update I have for you is there it is. We have 2 new employees hired. So they're my counterparts on the Front Range and the Eastern Plains. So that's their photos. So shared mine. So Valerie can't get mad at me. She's on this call. So Valerie is filling behind Donna Davis. Some of you may know Donna. She retired a couple years ago. So Valerie's our new Eastern Plains urban forester. And Mary Dancer's in a new position with us. She was the City of Littleton's urban forester. So she's come over to us, jump ship to the state. We're lucky to have her. She's our Front Range urban forestry specialist. So you'll see her helping out with a whole bunch of stuff on the Front Range, especially in the Front Range Urban Forestry Council a bit. So if you need to get a hold of them, their emails are pretty simple, just their first and last name like me. So just a couple things that are new that I wanted to share, and this isn't super new, but I just wanted to remind you all that we have the listserv going. A lot of you did sign up for this meeting because of the listserv that I shared, the email. So thank you for that. If you aren't on the listserv, you can just Google Colorado Urban Listserv, and because that link is a little rough, and I can put it in the chat. But there's also the pest serve that I like to remind people of. That's a really helpful place if you deal with pests on plants in Colorado. This is a great place to ask questions. Anybody can ask a question on the Urban Listserv. Don't feel like you're not allowed. That's the point, is that everybody is asking questions and sharing information successes. You're asking questions. We had a really good discussion last week. And so please ask questions and share on that. That's how it becomes really useful to everybody. The Inflation Reduction Act money, we gave out $1.6 million in 2024. And we plan to give out another $1 million this year in 2025, if all goes well. Again, funds must be used in communities listed as disadvantaged, and applications are going to be available in the spring. So we'll share more information via the listserv. There were 11 grants given out. I think 4 of them from this side of the state. So we got one in Grand Junction, City of Alamosa, City of Salida, and the Boys and Girls Club in the San Luis Valley. We're using the EPA's environmental justice map. So you can do a Google search for that. I'll put the link in the chat as well during our round robin, but things that are listed in orange are DI areas on the EPA map. So there's a little more, like in Grand Junction, there's a few more census blocks that are considered DI compared to the map we were using before. And then also with Co-Tree View, we paid to have a canopy assessment done on all DI communities that were identified in the CJust map. And this is free for everybody to access. If you just go to Co-Tree View in the upper left, you'll see the canopy button. If you turn that on, if it was a DI community, then a canopy map was already done. So Darren and Olathe, there you go. You can log on and check that out anytime. Just move. So just know with the Co-Tree or the IRA grant, we'll send out more information. And then Co-Tree View, again, it's free to use for everybody. It's app-based. It's not downloadable. You don't need to download anything. I am available to do trainings to communities or individuals for free. We just get on Zoom or Teams and I walk you through it. So here's just an example. Chris showed his with Basalt, which is great. There are a few new things that we've added this year, so I just wanted to show those. We added a planting event tree, so you can track if trees were planted at Arbor Day or saluting branches or with IRA money. You can track show me the trees that we planted at Arbor Day, so you can track those now. We have memorial trees in there as well. Tree ID was not editable before, but per request, it is now editable. So you can match your tree ID. If you have your own tree inventory that you've done in the past and you're trying to get them uploaded into the system and you want to make sure those tree IDs match your existing inventory, you can give those the IDs that you already have. And that was the point of making that editable. I changed primary management need. It used to be management need 1 and 2, but based on Chris's suggestion, it wasn't clear what the intent of those were. So we changed them to primary and secondary. So then the intent is primary management need is management actions that should be done within 1 year, and secondary is anything beyond that 1 year. So provide clearances maybe year 1 and put it on a rotation schedule is further out. So that's the intent of changing the names on those management needs. There is a new, if you're on your phone, you can now change I don't know if you can hear the bell in the background. My cat's playing with her toy. The tree plotter just sent out an email that you can, if you're on your phone, you can change the orientation of the map on your screen. So that can help you if you're walking up or down a street collecting data, that the map is facing the direction you're walking. And so that's a nice field-based tool for those collecting data in the field. So they sent out an email on that. Again, if you want to make an account, free to do so. Go to the website, click on the button in the upper left for login, and then you can create an account and it will come to me asking for me to approve it. If you don't have an account for your community, then I will add one for your community so you can start loading tree data. Just a quick update on the Urban Forestry Council. We are meeting, the goal is we meet 3 times a year virtually and 1 time a year in person. So I've updated these meetings to now be the 3rd Tuesday of the month. And that's once a quarter from 9 to 11. So this year is January 21st today. The next one is April 15th. For that meeting, I have Plant Select, Ross Shrigley presenting, and Heather Listerman giving an update on Glenwood Springs. They got some IRA money and they've been working on updating their inventory and creating a new program to engage the community. And then in July 15th, John, you all heard John agree to present. So we got that one nailed down. And then I'll have another presentation for that October one, or for that July one. The October meeting will be in person, like we did this last year in Montrose. We had about 80 people attend, which was one of the biggest attendances we've ever had for one of these meetings. So thank you for everyone who came and supported that. If you have ideas on presentations, honestly, I need presenters. Ideas are great. I have lots of ideas. I need people who are willing to step up and give a presentation. That's always the hardest part of putting these meetings on, is finding the people to present the information. So if you know someone who wants to present, or you're interested in presenting, like Bill, he's only presented once before. This was his second time presenting, but he's told me he wants to get better at presenting and get more experience. This is a really low-key, easy way to get some experience presenting. Nobody's gonna be throwing things at you, especially since it's virtual. It really helps. So if you want some experience, you want to share some information on some education, some experiences you have, some research you've done, please just reach out to me and let me know. I'd love to have you present. I get a lot of emails, and so I wanted to share some educational resources if you're looking to learn more. Vibrant Cities Lab is put on by the U.S. Forest Service and American Forests. It's a free online hub for the latest research, best practices, and tools. EPA integrated pest management webinars, and then Urban Forestry Today. So I'll throw these in the links in the chat during the round robin, but they send out emails with different online meetings and research articles all the time. Specifically, there are some trainings coming up. On February 12th, the American Arbor Day Foundation is doing a presentation on how to diversify your tree boards and departments. The Urban Forestry Today has got trees, nurseries, and the urban forest community on February 13th. And the EPA is integrated pest management webinars, getting to the root of the problems, myths about urban trees and soils. So I'll throw a whole bunch of links in the chat, but just wanted to let you know about these upcoming trainings that I think I signed up for all of those as well. So that's what I wanted to share. So stop sharing. So I'll throw a bunch of those in the chat. Anyone have any questions about my quick presentation there? So now it's the round robin. I was going to call on Neil to, so the round robin is open to everybody to share what's going on, successes, questions. I think everyone really gets something out of asking questions in this group, because they've got a lot of really experienced people here that might be able to help. So consider this a virtual urban listserv conversation opportunity. So I was going to ask Neil to give an update on the champion tree list and where he's at with that.
Sure. I put it out just Sunday to the listserv people, and I might have to update that even from the couple things I've seen today. But we put on about 20 new trees this year, so we're in the neighborhood of 825 trees. It's just getting crazy large, but typically what I do, we try and remeasure each tree once every 10 years. And so typically what I do, besides the travels I do, is to work with city and state district and area foresters to shoot them a list each year or every other year to help remeasure their champion trees in their particular town or city. Some interesting new species. I met with Tim Buchanan, Fort Collins City Forester and Freddie Habrick this summer and this fall. And a lot of the new trees came from Fort Collins that are now on the list. And when Tim and I went out, we spent all day and didn't get to the whole list he had. So he knows where a lot of these trees are since the last 38 years he spent with Fort Collins. He had planted or he planted himself. So I think we'll get some new ones there. But Kamie, you talked about training sessions. I've been thinking about putting together a training session on how to measure a champion tree properly. I know
I like that.
The national program has been shifted over to University of Tennessee Urban Resources Department, and Jack Payne is now the national director. And it looks like they have put out a 2024 national champion list. So you could probably access, I don't have the exact email address right now, but ntcp.org should be able to get you to that list of national champs. I think we have 6 or 7 and maybe have a couple more in the works that I'm thinking about. And hopefully I'll be able to make maybe another trip to Grand Junction area, Western Slope this summer to look at some more trees and maybe stop in to see some of you all just to kind of get acquainted or reacquainted or whatever. It's a beautiful part of our state, obviously, and a lot of territory to see.
Yes, I got a message from my hairdresser when you were visiting and measuring her parents' tree, because the world is small in the tree world.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that information. I think it would be great to either have you if you wanted to do a training virtually through either this or the Front Range, because we record those meetings too, or if you want to come out in October and do an in-person training at the meeting in October. So we can talk about what would work best for you. But I think that would be great.
Is that generally a PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah, it can be.
Okay.
Can I add something, Neil?
Yes.
If anyone is aware of a champion tree that has been removed, can you email Neil or myself? We try to keep up on it, but it's nice to know so we're not looking for them later on.
Yeah, that's helpful for sure. And some of the mountain trees that were discovered in the mid-90s have not been remeasured since, just because it takes a lot of time and travel and energy to get to them. And honestly, the directions are pretty sketchy in a lot of different ways. So, I'm hoping to maybe get together with some folks to be able to see if we can find these or just take them off the list. So, but virtually all of them are conifers, obviously.
Yeah, and we're working on getting the trees updated in Co-Tree View. And the big problem is that they need a good lat long to order to go into Co-Tree View for putting them on the map. And some of those older trees that haven't been measured don't have good lat longs either, or even the ones in town might not have had that data collected. And so that's what Neil and I and Valerie and Mary will be working on, is getting all that data updated so we can have a good map for people to view of where the champions are across the state.
Yeah, so all the trees that get measured, among other things, besides just the size, is to emphasize, to get a GPS coordinate on them. And so we've been filling in a lot of blanks, but obviously with 800 trees, got a long ways to go.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Tom, did you want to add anything? Yeah, I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, I'm just excited that we have Neil at the helm of that. And when you get over this way, give me a shout. I'd love to spend some time with you and hopefully Kamie, and just revisit a lot of the trees that we nominated years ago. So anyway, excited about that.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, shoot me your phone number.
I will. I will.
All right, who else would like to share something that's going on?
I would like to share something.
Yeah, please, Elson.
The statewide annual 5th grade Arbor Day poster contest is now accepting submissions through the end of March. So if you have kiddos in 5th grade, if you can get in touch with their 5th grade teachers or their art teachers and help them facilitate a contest in their schools. We're hoping to get a lot of schools participating this year, especially from our rural communities.
Mhm.
So contest details are on the CTC website.
And then you
and
had
the
posted.
theme this year is superpowers of trees. So
Oh, that's right. I liked your AI image that you shared.
thank you. I love ChatGPT.
So she shared an image through the Urban Listserv. If you signed up for it, you would have enjoyed her AI superpower tree. And then you had posted something in the chat about the tree archive. You want to give an update on that?
Yeah, so thanks to Kamie's assistance, we were able to get a grant from the Colorado Garden Foundation. Half of that grant, sorry, half of that money will be going to plant some trees at the Western campus outside of Kamie's office. And then the other bit of the funds will go to be updating the featured tree archive. And so definitely looking for any feedback on any of the species so we can make some recommendations for the Western Slope communities in the featured tree archive.
Yeah, thanks. I know that I've used those featured tree write-ups a lot to get information about tree species. Vince and I wrote a lot of those, and I'm sure some folks on here have written some in the past. So some of them need to be updated, some of them, and then there's quite a few that need to be added. So if anyone wants to help, I think with doing some write-ups or just going through that archive and seeing which ones need updating, that would be helpful as well. So good things are coming. Thanks, Chris. Valerie, do you want to give any update on how things are going on the Eastern Plains?
Yes, give me 1 second. There's kids out here and I need to close the door.
She works at the Spur office in downtown Denver, and so lots of people and kids going through.
Okay, sorry. Yes, we have yet to restart an official Eastern Plains Urban Forestry Council, but that is a goal by the end of the year. If anybody, obviously anyone can participate no matter where you are geographically, but it will be focused on Eastern Plains communities and kind of real small town, urban and community forestry issues. Yeah, we have a lot of, I think, interest out there for a council of that type. There's a lot of small towns that need any kind of assistance they can get as far as funding and training and just general technical expertise with, all things trees. So yeah, really excited to try to get that going soon. Obviously with the help of Donna Davis, who you probably all know.
Cool. Thanks, Val.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start calling on people if you don't start stepping up. I know you all have interesting things going on. All right, Andy Rice, how's it going with your IRA grant planning?
Oh, it's just going great. No, yeah, we have an update and we're excited that we're planting, 80 or so trees over the next 2 years and improving irrigation. But as Adam alluded to, it was 15 below this morning, so we're just trying to up that caffeine intake and and get moving. But no, busy writing job descriptions. I can't tell you how valuable these meetings are to someone like me who isn't a trained arborist, but certainly has a keen interest in this work and loves it. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, exciting. So you said 80 trees over the next 2 years?
Yeah, yeah.
Go ahead.
We've actually done more than that. We've prioritized the 3 locations we're going to plant in this year, and we have a meeting with tree board folks this Friday to wander around and get some ideas on selection of species for those locations. And then actually this afternoon, Andy and I have a meeting to discuss kind of the right-of-way easements for the Boys and Girls Club application because of just potential changes of ownership with a lot that's for sale that could complicate things. So we just want to have our heads up so we can have those things in place to let the Boys and Girls Club know that maybe we'll have to concentrate around these locations or what changes we might need to do to help them.
Awesome. Yeah, so you're planting trees along kind of a main corridor that the kiddos walk from to school to the Boys and Girls Club. Is that what that provide them some protection?
Yeah, that's the idea with the Boys and Girls Club. It's about a mile-long stretch, and approximately a third of the mile of it is the school district owned property. So there's no concerns there, but the other big lot, it's been on and off for sale for years. And so we just want to make sure we have, we're planting trees where they won't accidentally disappear if it does happen to sell soon. And I'll be honest, it's kind of a review of like where we can, how far back, let's say, do they have to have a, if it was turned into a, I don't know, we'll just say a apartment complex or a, like some sort of other business thing, like how far from the intersection can they, do they have to have the next intersection? So does that give us space to plant? How much of a buffer around fire hydrants do they have to have where they can't have entrances? And so like, does that give us 20 feet? Does that give us 40 feet that we can pop a few more trees in? So kind of strategically look and see like, how can we proactively make sure that, because we still want to put the trees there, but if it means concentrating a few into a shorter space and maybe have a little bit of a gap to provide that future planning, we just want to take those into account.
That makes sense.
Adam, quick question. What is the zoning for it? Is it an apartment kind of the zoning or just commercial or?
Do you remember, Andy?
I don't, I mean, it may be mixed use of commercial, residential.
Okay, like a high density residential / commercial type of area. I would think with that zoning, they would have a landscape requirement also for the right of way. So one idea might be, whoop, did I hear somebody? One idea might be to actually partner with the property owner in terms of helping to offset costs, because they're going to be required to put in that landscaping anyway as part of that development. And so you guys are doing them a huge favor actually putting these trees in before they do it. So one idea would be to use it as leverage to your advantage, and also include them as part of your promotion of the project as a partner. And then they can help pay for water too. Ideas, just ideas.
Thank you.
Lisa, how's it going over in the nursery world? Any cool updates for us?
Hey y'all, any cool updates? Well, I can tell you what I've been doing. So all the tree and shrub purchases of 2024, just scanned all those invoices. We got a cool scanner, and that felt good to really review everything that we purchased tree and shrub wise. And then writing blogs for our website. We've got an educational learning center, top menu. And so just considering things that are on the more sustainable approach to gardening, horticulture, planting, soils, irrigation. I look forward to jumping into that. And just yeah, just focus on the species for 2025. Most of that is already ordered. And yeah, so just enjoying getting to the writing mode and more scanning, of other documents and that kind of thing.
Any trees that you're trying this year that do you get anything interesting ordered for tree varieties this year, species?
Yeah, thanks to Chris Beiser, Town of Basalt. Yeah, I tell you, Chris, we had 4 remaining magnolia, and I sold 4 of them to this one gal that's got this new operation near Emma, and so I would like to buy one as well. And Chris, I forget the variety on that.
He had to go.
Oh, he had to go. Yeah. So yeah, we got some columnar lacebark pine. It's one of my favorites. Just the lacebark. When I was working for the city of Glenwood, planted some espresso
coffee trees.
Coffee, yeah. And so that's one of my favorites as well. Again, some of the oaks, the Chickabin and the Texas Red. I want to try here. I want to plant it here at the nursery.
Yeah, John said in his comments that they're using did you say Texas Red, John, for some of your cold hardiness trials?
It's planted at the Spur Research Grove. So it's here, and the plans for that grove and its trees, at least in the immediate term, are water use physiology studies.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Cool.
Very cool.
We have some other oaks in the cold hardiness studies.
Neat. Very cool. And then just wanted to say that we've got a nice curated native tree and shrub section here at the nursery. So yeah, that's good for here, Ms. Kamie.
Oh, thanks, Lisa. I shared your the link to your blog in the chat for anyone who wants to enjoy that.
Well, Kamie, thank you for everything that you do for us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Much appreciated.
All right, well, that takes us pretty close to 11 o'clock, unless anyone else would like to share any last thoughts. Again, our next meeting will be April 15th with Plant Select and a Glenwood Springs update. Please reach out to me if you have anyone who you think would give a good presentation, or if you'd like to get some experience doing a presentation, you're always welcome. So reach out to me. Thank you so much. I'll get those CEUs sent off, and appreciate your all's time today. Stay warm.
Thank you, Cam. Bye, everyone.
See you guys.
Thank you.